out in violence, and we must all answer the call to defend our American ideal and work together to uphold our republic. In 2020, Heritage Action is directly confronting the left in every corner of the debate, in neighborhoods, in classrooms, and in the public square. To be successful, it starts with dismantling the foothold the left has on swing voters and growing our grassroots army. Since April 1st of this year, Heritage Action has been on the ground in Iowa, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the 4 states at the tipping point of the debate, states that will decide the future of our country. We are speaking directly with swing voters to push back against the left's extreme positions. And we're focusing on the issues that unite the majority of Americans: culture, immigration, the workforce, and the economy. Our Grassroots Action program is nimble and innovative. When governors closed down their states because of COVID-19, our team members picked up their phones and called people directly. When states reopened, they laced up their boots and went door to door. And we can pivot as regulations change. In every conversation with swing voters, we reinforce American values and show these voters they don't have to bow down to the angry agenda of the left. And as we go, we add to our team, finding new recruits for our Sentinel program. We have already reached over 2 million voters and are working to bring them into the conservative coalition for good. Winning converts by November is urgent, but our work cannot stop there. Heritage Action is determined to build a resilient grassroots infrastructure, strong enough to challenge the left in every corner of the fight and to be present year after year. Our goal is to do more than just talk to our base. To protect America, we must turn swing voters into warriors for our cause. America is the standard bearer to the world for freedom and prosperity. She must be preserved. We've seen this day coming, and Heritage Action was founded for a moment such as this. So, if you want to defend liberty, then join with Heritage Action today. Because like you, we will not back down.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage your Executive Director of Heritage Action, Jessica Anderson.
Hello! And welcome, finally, to our Fight for America Town Hall this afternoon. My name is Jessica Anderson, Executive Director of Heritage Action, and I'm so glad you all could be here. I love Des Moines. I love that it's hot. I'm a South Florida girl, so it's nice to be back in the heat and to be with friends and family, and so many that are here today. I'd like to start by giving a special shout out to the men and women in uniform here with us in our audience today in Des Moines, to our law enforcement officers that work so hard to keep our neighborhoods, our cities, our families safe and secure. I'd also like to welcome Sentinel Nation and Heritage membership that are tuning in online all across the country as we seek to fight for America and the principles we hold dear, and in particular as we support the law enforcement here in this state and across the country. So welcome to each and every one of you. And that sweet baby, a big welcome there. So to kick us off, we are going to start with the prayer and the pledge. I'd like to invite Jack Seward and Joel Willoughby to lead us in a pledge and the prayer. Gentlemen?
Pray.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we look to you for your blessing. We recognize that you have blessed the United States of America far more than it deserves. You are full of grace and mercy that is new every day. Father, you have already freely and greatly provided the 2 greatest gifts that could ever be given, the Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Now we simply ask for your continued grace, mercy, and love on this country and its leadership. We join our hearts today, begging you for your heavenly wisdom so that we may glorify you with our thoughts, words, and actions. Specifically, we ask for your intimate presence and divine favor with the state and federal leadership present here today. As they seek your face and your will, please honor them with your wisdom and favor. Thank you, Lord, creator of the universe, for all you do. We love you. Thank you for loving us first. By the precious and holy name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. today's discussion is both timely and I think we would all agree it's urgent. We have the pleasure of hearing from a number of elected officials as well as a special elected official that won't need too much of an introduction, which is Vice President Mike Pence. But before we get to our town hall with the Vice President, we are going to hear from the Acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Chad Wolf. We're also going to hear from Governor Kim Reynolds and Iowa's very own Senator Joni Ernst. Before we get to that introduction, I'd like to set the stage for really why we're gathered here today. We have all seen the lawlessness and the anarchy that is played out in our country's cities, in our neighborhoods, and most recently in our nation's capital. The radical left has been attempting to turn the very American vision of equality and liberty into a partisan weapon. We've seen this play out as they've silenced those that they hate, and they had admonished us for our freedoms and the liberties we hold dear. In many parts of this country, mobs have turned against the police, they've asked us to bend a knee, and they've assaulted our American values. The actions of this violence and destruction in some places have been relentless, and they've been met with cheers from the left, and it's about time they're met with opposition from us as conservatives supporting the law enforcement on the line. But even more than what we've seen play out, we've also seen that there's a true intent of the liberal left today, which is to cause more chaos and to cause more destruction. But friends, it is not only a message of concern. The message of today is one of hope and confidence for our future. For behind every single fight stands a thin blue line. And that thin blue line is exactly what is made up and what this town hall today is about, the courageous law enforcement officers that defend our streets, our livelihoods, and our lives. Law enforcement today, each of you, you deserve our thanks. It's plain and simple. You deserve our appreciation. And on behalf of Heritage Action and the Heritage Foundation, I'm here to say that you're not alone. Behind you are the great men and women across this country of grassroots America. Conservatives that are willing to stand up and to go on offense to support our great nation in the face of anarchy and lawlessness. For 10 years, Heritage Action has been identifying and growing grassroots activists. We have a network of 1 million activists coast to coast, and we have 20,000 highly trained sentinels. This army is ready to mobilize. We are ready to directly counter those that seek to tear down our founding and disrupt our neighborhoods for their efforts. So to this end, today, we launch Fight for America. It's a simple campaign with a very simple message, going on offense to advocate for American values and institutions in the face of radical extremism. Continuing our support to champion the law enforcement, to say thank you. What else will we do? Well, we're going to call for accountability within our education systems. And we're going to reinforce that the way to fight for America is to vote for America. Fighting for America is about every single one of us. It's about you and it's about me. And we know that America is strongest when we all band together to not only protect our values, but to support those that are protecting us. That is why we call for safety and security, and that is why we call for an America that is good, fair, and secure. So with this in mind, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, which is the Acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Chad Wolf. Since his appointment in 2019, Secretary Wolf has overseen all aspects of the Homeland Security portfolio, including quelling the recent violence in cities like Portland, Seattle, New York, Chicago, across this country. Mr. Wolf is also responsible for the efforts to secure the southern border, as well as ensuring that we have a safe and secure election. So with that, I'd like to introduce Acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. Chad Wolf. All yours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Make sure this is on.
Yep.
All right, I think this one's on. I appreciate Jessica for that introduction and certainly for your words regarding the law enforcement community. And I see we have a number of folks here in uniform, so let me say thank you for what you do every day, protecting our communities and our country. Before I get started in talking about the law enforcement mission of the department, let me first recognize the weather event that affected probably many of you in this room and certainly some of your friends and families from this past Monday evening. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is part of the Department of Homeland Security, and we're working with local officials, your Homeland Security and emergency management officials here in Iowa to make sure that the residents of Iowa have the resources they need as you get the power back up and running and respond to the derecho of this past week. Let me just jump into a little bit about the law enforcement mission of the department. I think we're at a critical time in our country when it comes to the rule of law, and it comes to law enforcement. And there's really, I understand personally some of the sacrifices that our law enforcement officers and your families make every day, not only to protect your communities and protect our homeland, but the pressures that you're under, particularly in this type of environment. So again, let me say thank you. The department is the nation's largest law enforcement agency throughout the country. We have a number of law enforcement, we have 9 different operating components, and many of them have law enforcement duties. So as we think about certain calls of recently to defund law enforcement, defund the police, and the attacks that we see on law enforcement, it gives me and my men and women of the department great pause and great concern. As ICE, our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, goes out every day and arrests and deports criminal aliens, arrests and deports transnational gang members, we have individuals calling for the abolishment of ICE. That's concerning. When we have our Customs and Border Protection Agency, who every day is stopping dangerous drugs from coming into the country, dealing with and interdicting dangerous cartel members, we have certain politicians and officials continuing to advocate for open border policies. And as we have, we've seen city after city, we have criminals, we have rioters, and we have other individuals really doing some very, very dangerous things in cities across the country, Chicago, Portland, and elsewhere. We see the fringe element talking about defunding the police. And I have to say that it strikes a chord with me, it strikes a chord with all the law enforcement officials at the department. We'll continue to stand up to that. I've been very vocal about that as we move forward, making sure that folks understand the difference between law and order and what the other side and what, again, that fringe element is talking about out there. As you all know, and I say again, many of you in uniform, law enforcement officers are really that thin blue line that keeps our community safe. It's the difference between order and chaos. And so again, I'm happy to stand not only with President Trump, Vice President Pence, and the entire administration to let you know that we will always have your back. You will not find a stronger supporter for the men and women of law enforcement and men and women in blue than this administration. It's time that we stop playing politics with public safety. We put the interest of our communities first and the safety of our families first. And so again, wanted to make sure I deliver that message from the department. Just again, really excited to be here. When we talk about the border, just wanted to let folks know that President Trump has been very committed from day one, making sure that we secure our border. We have almost 300 miles of new border wall system in place by the end of this month. And we are apprehending those that cross the border illegally, those that have no legal right to be here in the U.S. We are apprehending them, and we turn 90% of them around in under 120 minutes, 2 hours. And that's a dramatic difference than what we've seen of policies in the past, what we call catch and release, where we would catch individuals, again, illegally coming into the country and then just release them into our communities. So we're taking some very strong measures to make sure that we continue to do what we need to do on that southwest border. Let me talk briefly about Portland, because I'm sure some of you may have been following some of the developments in Portland. Unfortunately, what we saw in Portland for almost 60 days in a row, we had local and state law enforcement officials not doing their job directed by local officials not to enforce the law on their streets, in city parks, and at violence directed at a federal courthouse. For 60 nights in a row, we had federal law enforcement officers being attacked, not with just hard bottles and sledgehammers, but with IEDs, Molotov cocktails, commercial-grade fireworks. You've probably seen some of the pictures. It was a very, very dangerous situation. We've had over 300 injuries to law enforcement officials during that 60-day period, and it's an event that should not have happened. Oregon State Police finally came in, finally started to bring some rule of law back to the streets of Portland, And unfortunately, it took them 60 days to do that. They should have done that on day 2. And again, I lay that at the feet of the local officials, both state and local officials there in Oregon. So wanted to make sure that folks understood where we stand when we talk about law and order, when we talk about restoring the rule of law, and making sure at the department we're going to continue to do what Congress has entrusted us to do across the board with all of our authorities. I think one thing that I have found remarkable over my 3.5 years this time around at the department is the call from some to simply ignore certain laws that have been passed by Congress, wanting the department to pick certain laws to enforce and choosing not to enforce others. And we've been very clear from day one, that's not what this administration is about. We're going to enforce every law in the book, regardless of what it is. And if you don't like the law, that's why we have a Congress, that's why we have elected officials, and we're going to ask them to change that law. But until they do, we're going to utilize all of our authorities to keep our community safe and our people safe. So again, thank you for letting me talk to you a few minutes. I know I'm the warm-up act. You're here for the Vice President and others. So again, appreciate all the men and women here in law enforcement that are in uniform today. Please know that you have the support of the Department of Homeland Security, 240,000 men and women strong behind you, willing to support you and come to your aid if you need. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
I've been alone with you inside my mind, and in my dreams I've kissed your lips 1,000 times. I sometimes see you pass outside my door. Hello, is it me you're looking for? I can see it in your eyes, I can see it in your smile. You're all I've ever wanted, and my arms are open wide. 'Cause you know just what to say, and you know just what to do, and I want to tell you so much. I love you.
Please welcome back to the stage the Executive Director of Heritage Action, Jessica Anderson.
Thank you, thank you. So great to hear. Today. I have the great privilege now of providing our next introduction to a woman that will be a familiar face to many of you, Senator Joni Ernst. She is no stranger to the fight on the front lines to advocate for freedom and protect this great country we live in today. Senator Ernst joined the Senate after a 23-year military career, and she is Iowa's own and very best. And please join me in welcoming her to the stage. Senator?
Thanks, everyone, so much. It's great to be with you today, and God bless all of you that are here in uniform as well. I really do appreciate it, and I'm going to try and make my remarks very, very brief so you can get on to the main event, and we do have Vice President Mike Pence here to say a few words for you today. So anyway, again, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here with the Vice President. It's good that he's here. We've had a number of events over the past couple of days that we really want the Vice President to be aware of. So for the folks that have been through this storm system, God bless you. Our hearts are with you, and we are here to assist. So, just folks, I've got a few notes here, and I want to make sure that I'm covering down on all of these topics because they are important topics. What our country is facing today is a very difficult situation. So we've been looking at the TV, and all of you out there, you might flip on the TV at night or first thing in the morning, and what we see out there, we see citizens that are going through their communities. They're beating in windows, breaking in windows. They're beating down our senior citizens, and we see them out there toppling statues. And thankfully, we don't see a heck of a lot of that here in Iowa, but we do see it in other places. And so we have a huge concern in that area. We want to know, when is this insanity going to stop? I can't stand to see what is happening in some of these wonderful cities across the United States. So many of us did see the video of George Floyd, and I think it would hurt any mother or father to watch that video. But what we have seen now is the left hijacking a crisis. They're absolutely hijacking this crisis, and it's so frustrating. So what they are trying to do is sow division out there, and they're trying to tear down our communities, the very fabrics of our society, and stop conversations from actually happening. So we're trying to pull together. We're trying to have constructive conversations, but that's not what the left wants. That's not what they want. And so instead, what we are hearing are cries for defunding the police or dismantling the police. And I hate it when I hear my colleagues talking about this. I don't think that is the solution, and we shouldn't be striving for that. Now, their motives are pretty darn transparent. We can see through that. So what we've got out there, how many of you have heard of CHOP or CHAZ? Okay, an autonomous zone in Seattle. Hopefully most of the crisis has passed over there, but we see this popping up in other communities as well. We see rioting and protests in Portland. We see it in Chicago. We see it in Minneapolis. And certainly the example of Seattle is one that I honed in on. So an autonomous zone where the mayor has forbidden police from responding to citizens in need within that autonomous zone. No fire services, no emergency medical services within the autonomous zone. So when I heard about that, I decided it was time to propose legislation. If they truly want to be autonomous, then the federal government should not be sending dollars into those areas. And those mayors, they can do without our federal taxpayer dollars if they truly want to be autonomous. So we have introduced that legislation. And you know, we shouldn't be funding leftist anarchy. We just shouldn't. So I don't know about you, and I know we have a lot of viewers out there that are watching as we're live streaming, but I think all of us would understand that if someone is breaking into our home, who are we going to call? I know who I'm going to call. I'm going to call the Red Oak PD. I'm going to call the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, right? That's who I'm going to call. I'm not going to call a social worker, okay? I know that our men and women in blue are trained to respond to those dangerous situations. We need you, and we appreciate you. That's what I'm going to do. So I know that many of our law enforcement officers as well, our men and women in blue, have served in a different capacity too. I know that many of you have also served in a different uniform, and that's the uniform of our great armed services. And so many of you may be veterans of Iraq or Afghanistan. So I want to say thank you so much for the multiple ways that many of you have served your communities and your country. So as we move on, I'll keep it brief here too, but you know, we do need to take action on race. We know that. And we need to make some reforms on policing. And I want to say kudos to my colleague and my friend, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He came up with a very, very good proposal in the Senate, which would have started us on the way to reform, justice reform. And you know what? Our Senate Democrats blocked it. And I was so disappointed in that action. You know, I wanted them to follow the example of Iowa, where Republicans and Democrats came together in our Iowa legislature and worked very hard on a piece of legislation addressing justice reform, and they got it done. And they got it done in a matter of days, folks, days. And it was signed into law by our phenomenal governor, Governor Kim Reynolds. So a little more Iowa is what we need in Washington, D.C. We need to show respect and support for the men and women that are out there protecting us, but we also need to balance that with some of the injustices that we have seen, and we can do that. So I really do want to thank you so much for all of the great work that we see in our law enforcement communities. We know that your intent is there to protect us. And I appreciate all that you do and what you put on the line every single day. So God bless you so much for being out here, for participating today. Heritage Action has had a lot of really great work in this area, and we want to thank you for that as well. So we will keep pressing in Congress. We will keep moving forward. We will keep this country moving forward. But I want to thank you all for participating. God bless you for what you do. And of course, since we're in my home state of Iowa, God bless the great state of Iowa. And of course, as always, God bless our great United States of America. So thanks everyone so much for being here today. Thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well, the future of America truly comes down to this. Do you stand for safety and security, or do you support the lawlessness and the anarchy that we see running amok on our streets? Do you support American institutions and values, or do you allow history to be rewritten in the vein of lawlessness? Will you teach your children about liberty, equality, justice, forgiveness, America? There is no one more in touch with this American creed than our esteemed President and Vice President of the United States. It's my pleasure to welcome the Vice President to the stage today, Mr. Mike Pence.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you all. Please be seated. We've got an incredible group here. It's wonderful to be in Iowa. I want to thank Heritage Action for hosting us, and thank you all for coming out as we fight for America. And it's a great honor for me, standing here in this barn in the Hawkeye State, to look out and see this inspiring gathering. Small but mighty, men and women wearing the uniform of law enforcement. Let me say to each and every one of you, on behalf of the President of the United States, on behalf of your Vice President, and on behalf of the grateful nation, thank you for your courageous service every day. We will always back the blue. It is a momentous time in the life of our nation. We've gone through and are going through a time of testing, but soon we'll come to a time for choosing. And public safety is very much on the minds of the American people. As Senator Ernst just reflected, and as you heard from the Secretary of Homeland Security earlier in this very same program, you have a president, you have an administration that are committed to law and order and to supporting men and women who serve on the thin blue line. But I also want to say, I know that here across the heartland of America, you've just endured some unprecedented storms. And I know that the police officers and sheriffs who are standing before me today, and many that are looking on from afar, have played a role in responding to families in the midst of this devastation. We grieve for the loss of 3 lives in 2 states. But I met with families today that had literally lost millions of dollars of crops as well, and property. But on behalf of all of the families that you responded to, that once again, that you went into harm's way where others might have been running in another direction, let me thank you for what you have done in these unprecedented storms for the people of Iowa and the people of America. Well done. And again, I just want to say thank you to Heritage Action. I know we're going to be having a conversation in a few moments, but Jessica and Heritage Action are a bulwark of freedom and free markets, but I'm particularly grateful that Heritage Action would use their vast reach across this country to focus on that which I believe is of first importance for the American people. I mean, security is the foundation of our prosperity. Our nation is able to be free and prosperous because people wear the uniform of the United States and serve at home and abroad defending this nation. But we're able to live in the most prosperous nation on earth and to run our businesses, to raise our families because of the thin blue line. Because each one of you every day straps on a sidearm, puts on a badge, puts on a uniform, and you count your lives as less important than ours. I mean, it's a humbling thing to think about. I love what the Bible says about those who bear the sword, that you do not bear the sword in vain. Throughout history, you are, as a good book says, servants for good. And I want to tell you that as we were running for this office 4 years ago here in the great state of Iowa, and as we've served in this office every day since, it's been a challenging time for law enforcement. In the last administration, it seemed like a reflexive effort to blame police first, and we're hearing the most law enforcement. But I want to assure you that your president and this vice president know that the men and women who serve in law enforcement are the best people in this country. You're the best people in this country, and you will always have the support of the American people. But this is a challenging time. It truly is. And I'm grateful not only for Senator Joni Ernst, but let me also say I'm truly grateful for the service and the leadership in a challenging time by the Acting Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Chad has done a remarkable job for the American people, and join me in thanking Acting Secretary Chad Wolf for all he does for America every day. So I want to thank Governor Kim Reynolds, who will be along directly, and try this. The support that she's lent to law enforcement here in Iowa. She's really set an extraordinary standard, and we're truly grateful. Join me in thanking Governor Kim Reynolds for her great leadership during a challenging time. The people of Iowa. You know, we live in a time when we literally have leading politicians that are talking about defunding the police. And as that rhetoric rises from even some of the leading Democrat politicians in America, we're actually seeing a rise in violence across the country in cities where the case for defunding is being made most poignantly. And it's remarkable to think, as liberal politicians are talking about dismantling the police department, as they've suggested in Minneapolis, cutting NYPD by $1 billion in New York, and one city after another, Seattle, Portland, and elsewhere. We also see a rise in crime. I pulled these statistics on the way here on Air Force Two. Atlanta saw a 19% rise in shootings and a 9% rise in murders just in the recent days. Chicago's seen a 42% rise in shootings. Philadelphia's seen a 54% rise in shootings and a 20% rise in murders. New York City actually just reached its 1,000th victim, with more shootings this year already than in the last 2 years combined. And 21 people were shot in our nation's capital last weekend. These are heartbreaking numbers. But I must tell all of you that they're just a preview of Joe Biden's agenda for America. The truth is, you won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. When he was asked recently about law enforcement, he actually described well-armed police officers as people that could become, quote, the enemy to civilians. When he was asked if he would support redirecting funding for law enforcement, Joe Biden replied, yes, absolutely. And in fact, his new running mate, California Senator Kamala Harris, actually said when she was a candidate for president, that it was time to, in her words, reimagine police. I mean, the truth is, these efforts of blaming law enforcement for violence in our streets, blaming law enforcement for unrest across America, have got to end. We must back the blue. We must support law enforcement for the safety of all of our families of every race and creed and color. You know, there's a false choice out there that liberal politicians are projecting. It suggests that we've got to choose between supporting law enforcement or supporting our African American community. The truth of the matter is, we have done both. We will continue to do both. And with President Donald Trump in the White House for 4 more years, we're going to support law enforcement and expand public safety and opportunity for African Americans and every American of every race. We can do both. I mean, that's why under this administration, we've supported funding through the COPS program to hire 4,000 new police officers on the streets of America. It's also why this president, in the wake of senseless violence that continues at this very hour in Portland, Oregon, and in cities around the country, the president launched what we call Operation Legend. It's actually named after a 4-year-old little boy, Legend Talifero. Legend was in his home building a pillow fort with his dad. He was asleep that night in the pillow fort when gunfire broke out. Police officers arrived on the scene. They rushed little Legend to the hospital, but we lost him. But let me promise you, that little boy, little Legend, will not have died in vain. Operation Legend is going to save lives of children and families all across America. We will. We're surging personnel, surging resources. We, in cooperation with local law enforcement, we're going to bring peace to our cities, and we're going to quell the violence. And that's what the American people deserve. They deserve the support of law enforcement in their cities, and that's what you who serve in law enforcement deserve every day. And so I look forward to our conversation today. It's always humbling to stand before police officers. You know, I never wore the uniform of law enforcement, but my uncle was a cop in Chicago, Illinois for 25 years. And I remember when we drive up from that small town in Indiana where I grew up, and we go to Chicago to visit my grandparents. Me and my three brothers would marvel as he walked out of his bedroom every day, wearing that badge, having that sidearm. We'd look up at him and we'd see a hero. And I just want to assure each and every one of you that whatever happens in the public debate, that's how the American people see you. Each and every one of you, I truly believe with all my heart, are heroes. And never doubt, the American people know it, will always be grateful for the men and women of law enforcement. You're in the prayers of tens of millions of Americans every day. And let me say to you, but just as much to your families who are gathered here today, thank you for your service. I promise you, we'll always back the blue. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you for those comments and for sitting with us today. It's such a timely discussion as we've spent the afternoon talking about this issue and the need for safety and security, both in our neighborhoods, our larger cities, and it expands outside of just Iowa. It's a nationwide issue. So to kick off our discussion today, we have the real privilege of hearing from some audience members that have joined us for our town hall. So I'd like to introduce our first, Mr. Devin Sanders. Devin is a local business owner, and he is a 12-year combat veteran. So Devin, we've got your first question. Devin, this is Mr. Vice President. Meet each other, and let's kick it off.
Thank you, Devin. Great to meet you, Devin.
You as well. We actually met in Council Bluffs. Appreciate meeting you.
Great
Thanks for coming on the most beautiful day Iowa has to offer.
Beautiful day. Feels like I'm back in Indiana.
I'm sorry about that. So as a small business owner, and I'm sure a lot of civilians all across the U.S. and every state, we've experienced an uprise, and especially as a small business owner I make wooden flags for a living. I love spreading patriotism, but it seems like every event that I go to, I get harassed. I get told that I should be ashamed of spreading hatred and racism, and just for supporting law enforcement. And as cheesy as it sounds, I love supporting the flag. It's the best thing on earth. I think it's beautiful in everything that it stands for. So my question to you is, the past few months have shown how strong the mob and cancel culture is to businesses and private citizens when standing up for their beliefs and livelihood. How has the Trump administration stood up for the safety and constitutional freedoms of the American people?
Well, thank you for the question, but more than that, thank you for your service to America in uniform. We're truly grateful. And it's good to see you again. It really is. Well, look, with regard to public safety, on the larger question, I couldn't be more proud to be vice president to a president who's appointed more than 200 principled, conservative men and women to our federal courts at every level, who I promise you will uphold all the God-given liberties in our Constitution, from the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, to the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. I mean, this administration is proud of the way we've been able, 200 appointees to our courts with the strong support of Senator Chuck Grassley and Senator Joni Ernst. And we'll continue to stand strong for all of those freedoms and all of those liberties, including the freedom of speech. I mean, the right of peaceably assembling, the right of peaceable protest is as old as the nation. But let's be clear. Burning churches is not protest. Tearing down statues is not peaceful protest. People who destroy businesses and destroy properties and destroy statues will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Justice will be served. I will tell you that in Washington, D.C., and I don't have to tell the police officers here, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, and justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and the looting and the destruction of property that followed. And that's why President Trump took the action that he took in Minneapolis. He said to the governor of Minnesota, he said, either you quell the violence in your city or we will. And to his credit, Governor Walz deployed the National Guard and brought peace to the streets of Minneapolis. Acting Secretary Wolf will tell you, we had this very same conversation after weeks and weeks, more than 60 days of violence around the federal courthouse in Portland. Our administration spoke with Governor Brown and essentially said to her, our federal officials are going to be there to protect the courthouse and to keep peace in the streets around it if you don't. And just a matter of 2 weeks ago, she issued and deployed the state police to the region and deployed Portland police. The violence has continued, but the president's made it clear, whether it's Portland, whether it's Seattle, whether it's Chicago, whether it's New York City, we're calling on mayors, we're calling on governors to let law enforcement do your job. And if they won't let you do it, we'll do it. We have the obligation to bring public safety and security to our streets.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Vice President, it's been just such an interesting thing to watch the different phases of the violence and destruction over the last few months. And the people that have truly been on the front lines are our law enforcement officers. And so I'd like to call up next Lieutenant Todd Perdue. He is 18 years in service here in Iowa, Crawford County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us. And what is your question today, sir?
Hey, Todd, great to meet you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for being with us today and coming to speak with us. Obviously, with everything that's going on in the country with law enforcement, recruiting and retention has been a big problem. So my question to you is, what is the long-term threat to police officer retention from the defunding movement, and how can it be combated?
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Perdue, and you just join me in thanking him for a great career of service in law enforcement. I'm truly grateful to you. Recruitment and retention, mission critical. When I was governor of the state of Indiana, I will tell you, some of the most meaningful experiences I had was attending graduations from our police academy in the state of Indiana. You've been through it. And to see these young men and women step forward and to be willing to put on the uniform of no ordinary career. And that's why I hope all of you leave here, and anybody that's looking on, know that whatever you might hear in the public debate from the radical left or their defenders in the Democratic Party, the American people are for you. They're grateful to you. I hear it every day. I see it in the countenance of people. Every time that I speak about law enforcement, I know President Trump sees it in the faces of Americans every time he speaks about law enforcement. I just want to be very clear. The American people love the men and women in law enforcement, and we are grateful for what you do every day, really and truly. Now, that being said, I think you raise a very important question. I mean, your first obligation and the calling of your life is public safety. And so we're going to support law enforcement to stay on the mission of public safety. Domestic tranquility is a central feature of the purpose of government. But beyond that, the other thing that's wrong with the language of the radical left is one can't help but think it is both discouraging courageous young men and women from pursuing a career in law enforcement, and similarly, it's resulting in people choosing to leave a career in law enforcement. I actually read that roughly a month ago, because of the utter lack of support for NYPD by Mayor de Blasio, that they had to set a limit, a monthly limit on the number of retirements because they couldn't process the number of officers who were applying to retire out of NYPD early. I mean, that's heartbreaking to me. That's the largest police department in the United States of America. I must tell you, the world saw the character of NYPD and the New York Fire Department on September 11, 2001. These are the greatest people in the world, many of whom lost their lives on that fateful day of 9/11. And yet, to see the mayor talking about a $1 billion cut, pulling them back in terms of allowing them to go in and to deal with rioters and protesters, not allowing them to do their job is resulting in people losing a desire to be in law enforcement. And that's a real cost to public safety. And it's something that we have to talk about. And I think it's one of the reasons why I'm just so proud to serve alongside a president who backs the blue. I mean, and that's not to say that there aren't instances of abuse that have happened. As I said, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. But in my experience, nobody hates bad cops more than good cops. And I don't even want to say the majority, I want to say almost everybody that wears a uniform in the United States are the best of us. And all of you gathered here, that applies to. So your point is so well taken, and I hope people looking on who are part of this national debate through Heritage Action to Fight for America will carry this message even more loudly. It compromises our public safety when we don't give support to law enforcement and let you do your job. It also compromises our public safety when young men and women or experienced law enforcement officers no longer choose to wear the uniform. And that is happening around the country today. But that's going to stop with 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service and your question with us here today.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
The focus of so much of the attention right now on safety and security and quelling the violence and restoring law and order really hits home, and it hits home to those of us that are mothers, that are raising kids, that are thinking about our future generations and thinking about the country that we will leave behind. And
how old are you, little one?
I have a 7-year-old son and a 9-month-old baby girl. So I have my house full. Thank you. And there's a number of families that have joined us here today. They've brought their kids. They too are concerned about the direction around safety and security in our neighborhoods. And so I'd like to introduce Jen Fogel. She's our next testimony today. She is a mother here in Des Moines. Jen, we're so honored that you could join us. Please meet the Vice President. And
thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. And
thank you, Jen.
We're trying to raise some boys who love God, they're respectful, and love history in their country. So as a mother of 4 kids, it's difficult and disheartening to watch the destruction happening across America and in some of our own communities. As we witness the diversity of thought come under attack, what is the Trump administration doing to improve educational opportunity for all Americans?
Well, Jen, number one, these are your boys here. This is your family here. They're great. Stand up. What a beautiful family this is. Wonderful. 3 boys. You have 3 boys? Okay, I was going to ask because I'm one of 4 boys. So I respect you even more. Thanks for a great question, too. Well, let me address that question by simply saying that we're going to just continue to stand strong for all the values and ideals that have made this country great. And I really do believe that the American people are with us. The president often speaks about the silent majority, but I think the silent majority will be silent no more. So I hear it and I see it. I read a good amount of my mail every day that comes to the White House. And I hear people all the time talking about feeling in a very real sense like their values, their traditions, their beliefs are under constant criticism by the mainstream media and by politicians on the left. But I really do believe the vast majority of the American people are proud of this country. We're proud of law enforcement. We believe in faith and family and freedom and are going to step forward in roughly 80 days from now and support men and women that are standing for all of those timeless principles and ideals. I mean, I really do believe that the future's never been brighter for this country. I mean, when you think about what we've passed through as a nation, in our first 3 years, because this president rebuilt the military, largest increase in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. And that means a special amount to me because my son's a United States Marine. And my son-in-law is a Navy lieutenant and a pilot. And so the investments that we've been able to be a part of and seen made have meant the world to us and made America safer. But to see an agenda that cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, supported ethanol in places like Iowa, negotiated the kind of free and fair trade of the USMCA, stood tall on the world stage. You may have heard today for the first time in more than 25 years, a major Arab country formally recognized the state of Israel, the United Arab Emirates today. And it's because of strong leadership, but it's also been leadership on values. And I couldn't be more proud to serve alongside a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life, for religious liberty, and has been appointing leaders and jurists to our courts at every level that defend those principles. And so I just want to give you a word of encouragement that I truly do believe that if all of us will let our voice be heard in the days ahead, we're going to solve the challenges of the time in which we live. We're going to heal our land, and each and every day we're one day closer to the day that we put the coronavirus in the past. We have a ways to go, and we're going to continue to spare no expense to make sure that our healthcare workers and all of those that are struggling with the coronavirus have the health care that we'd want any one of our family members to have. And can I just say thank you to the members of the law enforcement community? You've been there for families throughout this coronavirus pandemic, and I thank you for your courageous and compassionate leadership in a challenging time for our nation. But I truly do believe as we see our economy starting to come back, in the last 3 months, 9 million people have gone back to work after we lost 22 million jobs. I think the American people know that the strength of this nation is derived from our commitment to our national security, to public safety, to a commitment to freedom and free enterprise, and a commitment to the ideals of life and liberties that have always been the wellspring of American greatness. And I truly do believe, with 4 more years in the White House, with people like Joni Ernst back in the United States Senate, we're going to make America great again, for you and for these beautiful boys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jen. So, sir, we've got time for one more question to squeeze in here. Sergeant Chad Butler, he works for Shelby County Sheriff's Office. He's been in law enforcement for 21 years, which is an incredible amount of service as well. Sir, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Vice President to ask your question today.
I'm very humbled to meet you, Mr. Vice President, and want to thank you and President Trump for all you do for law enforcement across the country.
Thank you, Sergeant. It's a privilege.
Thank you. As a law enforcement officer, I'm personally concerned about the future of safety and security in this country. What's the Trump administration's plan to reform policing in America?
Well, first, join me in thanking the Sergeant for his career at public service. We're grateful for you. And I'm going to say to you, Sergeant, and everybody in this room, you have the harder job. I mean, they only shoot at me with words, okay? And I want you to know your president, your vice president are grateful to you and admire you and respect you. I'm humbled to meet you. I really am. And I love your question as a stepping off point, because we're absolutely committed to doing just that. I don't know a police officer that I've ever met that didn't want to get better at what you do. And that's the reason why, in the wake of the tragic murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, President Trump signed an executive order and said, we're not going to defund the police. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to fund the police with additional resources so that you can have more training on the use of force, more training in what you all call de-escalation efforts. I mean, we live in an increasingly complex security environment, particularly in our major cities. President Trump recognized that and said that rather than defunding the police, we're actually going to fund more training, more support for law enforcement. Combine that with the COPS program, more law enforcement personnel on the streets. Combine that with Operation Legend that I mentioned, that will actually make federal personnel available to support local law enforcement. That's how we'll improve. And that's, as I said, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement and supporting our African American community or any of the families in our cities. That is a false choice. The choice America has made the last 3.5 years under this president, the choice you've made here under Governor Kim Reynolds, and the choice we're going to make for 4 more years is we're going to do both. We're going to support our African American communities. We're going to export educational opportunities. We support educational choice. This president supported the largest investment in historically black colleges and universities ever. You just heard Senator Joni Ernst reflect on my friend Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. He authored legislation the president helped move through the House and Senate that actually has created more than 8,000 what are called opportunity zones in cities across the country that are inviting investment in underserved areas and creating opportunities for people. And I must tell you, with that foundation I was just talking about, of less taxes, less regulation, more fair trade, more exports, more American energy, we had the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded for African Americans and Hispanic Americans in our first 3 years. And that, we believe, is the pathway forward. More support for law enforcement, for training, for resources, for personnel. A commitment to quell the violence on the streets, to make it clear to governors and mayors that if they don't do their job, we will. And secondly, is continue to support our African American neighbors, all the families in our cities, to make sure that they have safer streets, better schools, more jobs and opportunities. That's the pathway forward to bringing our country together and making America great again for every American. But thank you, Sergeant. Thank you for that great question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jess.
So the message today is simple. Support law enforcement. Return safety and security to our neighbors. And we know that to do this and to do this well, that our elected officials need to hear from grassroots Americans all across the country. So with that in mind, today, sir, we're launching a police pledge. And we're asking Americans from coast to coast to sign it. And it says that we will not support a bill, resolution, or movement that seeks to defund the police. And so I'm asking every single one of you, here today to sign this pledge, at home, watching on our live stream, to sign this pledge, and then to turn to your elected officials. As the Vice President mentioned, mayors, governors, city council, members of Congress, senators, all have a role to play as we quell the violence. Sign the police pledge and make this commitment not to defund the police. You can text 51776 now and sign the pledge today. So with that, we'll end our time. Thank you, sir, so much for being here. Thank you to our law enforcement officers.
Thank you, Jess.
God bless you. God bless America.
Jessica, thank you. Join me in thanking Heritage Action and thanking all the incredible law enforcement officers and families who are here. Greatest honor of my life to be your vice president. God bless you all.